Hello, welcome to the Two Fat Brokers podcast. I'm Ben Crompton from the Abu Dhabi branch of Crompton Partners Real Estate. This is
Barney Crompton from the Dubai branch of Crompton Saltini Real Estate.
Yes.
We have rebranded.
The rebrand. And today we're going to talk a little bit about something that's been in the news recently, which is a heated discussion between two developers regarding the off-plan market. So we want to talk about what they were talking about, their concerns, and what buyers look for in terms of off-plan, and why developers are so keen on off-plan, really, to the extent that some people in the Dubai and Abu Dhabi markets are complaining that there is too much off-plan. So just to talk about the reason why we're talking about this. So in the news recently, the head of one developer mentioned that another developer was basically launching far too much stock into the market. It was damaging the market. Now, as a result of that, the developer he was complaining about came back and said, no, actually, we're fine. We've got a good reputation. We can continue to launch this, and it's good for the market. And in amongst all of this, Dubai has launched the Higher Committee of Real Estate. Now, Barney, what's the Higher Committee of Real Estate, and what's it going to do?
I think it's going to have a few different guises, but predominantly the one that's been in the press is that the Higher Committee will be responsible for maintaining a higher level of diversity in new projects that are launched. So you don't get quite so many off-the-shelf cookie-cutter buildings being built. It will mean that Dubai is a more interesting and varied place to live, and also various different price points are catered for different level income. That's the cut.
It can only be a positive thing. I mean, we talk often enough about the fact that everyone wants to launch luxury this and luxury that. There's obviously
to the point at which diluted the meaning of luxury.
Yeah, there's obviously price points in the market that are still not being served, despite the cheaper products coming out at the moment.
Well, I would probably disagree in as much as that there's always a flight to quality in terms of whatever the market's doing, especially now we're in a bit of a softer market. You find that the quality of the product is the thing that defines the selling price. So obviously people are going to pay more for better quality, even if it's in a very similar location. So you'll find that the lower price points are being catered for just purely and simply by the buildings that are built less well.
Or older buildings, I suppose.
Older buildings
in areas that become unfashionable. I guess price decreases.
I think their main drive is to obviously, because Dubai is a fantastic city of amazing skyscrapers, but and there are real sort of landmarks in those amazing skyscrapers. But then if you look behind them, there are hundreds and hundreds of buildings that are off the peg almost. There's not really a huge amount of diversity in terms of what they offer. 40 to 80 stories, couple of swimming pools, couple of gyms, 1, 2 and 3 bedroom and a couple of penthouses, and that's it. There's not a huge amount of diversity, which is a problem that you only get from a city that is as built up or as populated in terms of skyscrapers or high-rise buildings as Dubai. You won't have committees like this set up in other cities where this issue is not faced by them. London doesn't have a huge amount of high-rise buildings, and those that are tend to be converted old buildings or new buildings with a greater level of diversity.
Okay, so you think that the way Dubai has grown up has meant that people are just building these skyscrapers? Although we're seeing sort of more villa communities. There was a recent launch by Ema, I think it was V on the Al Ain Road.
Yeah,
that was a villa community as well.
Yeah.
And particularly, I think, in the shape of Dubai, you're actually able to build those villa communities a little bit further out and a little bit cheaper in Abu Dhabi, because Abu Dhabi are sort of long and thin. We don't have easy access to as much land.
You have a lot more land. Your infrastructure is growing quite well. But again, going back to these villa communities, I think there are quite a lot of villa communities which also feel a little bit cookie cuttered. You drive down the street and one street could be exactly the same as the other. So I would hope that the new governing body is potentially going to have a look at that and try and get a bit of greater diversity in the villa developments.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's diversity. And we talk sort of generally about off-plan. There is a reason why people are launching all these off-plan projects. They're fantastic for developers with good reputations, because a developer can launch one of these great projects and it can be pre-sold in a couple of days. Amazing for the developer. They've sold it already just on pure launch. It's brilliant for their financing. They know they can pay for it. It's brilliant for the banks lending them the money because they know that's all secure. It's brilliant for the contractors because they know that they're going to get paid. So there's almost no downside to a developer launching. Also, it means they don't have to worry about what the market is going to do in 4 years when it actually comes to market, because they've sold it already, and assuming they get the price that they want.
Remember that it's sold in tranches. So you get a lot of these, yes, we're all sold out, tranche one, all sold out. And as you're finding now, tranche one is not necessarily a profit-making tranche, but it's great for branding as well because we've sold out, And then when they do launch number 2 and 3 and 4, there's less furore around it. And everybody thinks, this developer has done really well. So it's good for branding.
I mean, yeah, but I think if the developer could sell out everything in the first couple of days, I mean, we've seen this with a couple of buildings in Abu Dhabi. They would if they could get the price they wanted. But I think you're right. A lot of them go out phase one. They just want to get a bunch of cash in, and then they've got 4 years to slowly sell the rest.
Yeah.
4 years being from launch to building it. So that's why off-plan is good for developers. Why is it good for buyers?
We're seeing, the proof's in the pudding. I mean, there is still a huge faction of people who are buying off-plan, and we just had a discussion about it. The ability to be able to pick your own unit is a huge draw. To be able to get in there early and cherry pick what you think for your needs is the absolute best unit you can get.
Yeah, I mean, talking about people buying off-plan, saw a report out recently where people are still buying more off-plan than they are in the secondary market in Dubai. In Abu Dhabi, we don't have those figures, but it's a pretty startling figure given how
it's also price point again, which we discussed. If you buy in tranche one of a launch, you are going to be underpaying what that property will be worth when it's finally handed over. So there is the price point. A lot of the market research that's been done in Dubai is on the value of the property transactions, each individual one, and it's something startling like 92% of all property transactions in Dubai are under 2 million dirhams. That's secondary and off-plan.
Yeah, I mean, off-plan certainly seems to be these days pitched at a very attractive price point. I think with a payment plan. With a payment plan, because I think and the big difference between off-plan and built, and we were talking about this earlier, is with off-plan you can't see what you're buying.
No,
right?
There's no element of trust,
and also you can't move into it for obvious reasons. So off-plan is probably bought more by investors. So investors want smaller units because historically speaking, on a price per square foot basis, the smaller the unit, the better yield it gets.
Correct.
So you want smaller, cheaper units because that's what's attracting investors. It's difficult to sell off-plan to end users because you want to see where you're going to be living. It's difficult to get that feeling.
They don't have that foresight into the market. Typically, if you decide, right, I want to live somewhere, I want to buy somewhere, you want to move into it straight away. You don't go, okay, I'm going to want to live somewhere in 4 years' time. I'm going to buy something now and then take advantage of the payment plan. It just doesn't happen that way.
Yeah, unless you're super wealthy or organized. So when someone is thinking about moving in, they usually want to move, straight in, and obviously, and as you said, not wait for 4 years. So the off-plan market tends to be for investors and tends to be at that lower price point.
And the payment plans. So the payment plans work in the favor of the investor as well, because now there is this, I think it's the only place in the world that does it, in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, which is a post-handover payment plan. So now for an investor's perspective, what they do is they lease it out and they use the income from the lease to pay their following installments. So therefore really driving down the the ultimate purchase price of the house, which is very attractive to people, very attractive to investors.
We'll actually do another podcast talking about payment plans because it can be quite confusing for people as to how they work. So then to move on to the next section of this podcast. So the developers are having a little bit of a heated debate about the amount of stock that they're pushing onto the market. Now, there's a very good reason why it's difficult for developers to stop selling off plan even if they wanted to, and that is they're listed entities. They're listed on stock exchanges for the most part, the larger ones, and they have shareholders, and these shareholders want dividends and they want profits. Now, the problem with real estate companies is you only get profits once you sell one of your buildings or whatever. You don't make profits on a sort of a regular rolling basis the way most companies do. So if, let's say, a listed company stopped selling off plan and they decided, okay, we're going to stop selling off plan completely, we're only going to sell a built product, that means they probably wouldn't make any profit for 3 or 4 years. And that would kill the share price, the shareholders wouldn't be happy, and they'd need to find another way to generate revenue. Also, they'd have to then borrow money to pay their employees and things like that. So there's a real problem for listed developers. Once they've got into the whole off-plan market, it's incredibly difficult to then get out again because they just don't have the same cash flow that any normal company has, because they're just basically building and selling an asset, and the time taken to build this asset's 4 years. So it's quite enormous. And that's one of the reasons why people are talking about the issues currently with supply and demand. If you have a lot of developers who have to launch off plan, even if, let's say that, and there's no suggestion this is happening, even if they're launching it off plan, just to break even, just to generate cash flow, then what you end up doing is bringing properties to the market and more than necessary that you need. And there's a huge pressure on developers to continue to build and sell off plan,
which creates the dreaded oversupply under demand, ratio that property markets fear.
Yeah. I mean the situation in Dubai, and I think to a lesser extent in Abu Dhabi, but it's still there and it's talked about an enormous amount, is supply and demand. Now, I've watched a few broker videos recently and they talk about the market nearing its bottom because people can't go any lower. People just can't sell any lower. That, from an economics point of view is probably a little bit far from the truth, because if your property is empty and you'll only take 100 because you need that to pay off your mortgage and the market's at 90, you're just not going to rent it. You're going to need to take 90 and you're going to need to put money in. So I think when you talk just purely about the market getting so low, can't go any lower, I think that's probably not the case. The market can go.
I think perhaps what they're talking about is selling. From a selling perspective, people are getting to the stage where their original price is being reached by the market, and nobody really wants to take a haircut when they sell a house. From a leasing perspective, we're again in a weird part of the world where very few people have mortgages. I don't know what the ratio is, but I'd probably say somewhere like 50-50. Is a rough estimate on who has a mortgage and who actually owns their property outright. The reason I think what they're saying is that they can't go any lower is that they don't want to make a loss on their property purchase.
Yeah, I think that's true. No one wants to make a loss, but sometimes people have to.
Yeah, look, if you're going to sell in a market like we're experiencing right now, you've got to be selling for a reason. You can't just be selling because you just don't want it anymore. It's just that's not a smart play.
And fundamentally, the weird shape of property markets is most people buy just before the crash.
Yes.
So a hell of a lot of people buy at the top of the market, and they're only ever going to sell it at a loss unless they hold it all the way through the cycle up to the next one. Yeah. So the irony is most people buy before the crash, and not at the bottom where you should buy, where everyone wants to buy. Everyone wants to buy at the bottom. In reality, everyone buys at the top. Lots of people buy at the top, so there are people who will just have to take haircuts.
Who were the incredibly successful property tycoons in the 50s in the US? What was their name?
Yeah, You got me there.
Yeah,
Property tycoons.
They were American tycoons. They were businessmen. Nobody really knew where their income came from. They were super secret. Anyway, their motto was only ever buy when there's blood in the streets. So their motto was always buy at the bottom of the market. When no one else is buying, you buy. That's how they made their money. And that is a mantra that a lot of real property investors, they follow. And it's also why I think we see a lot of construction still happening now, in as much as that they believe that they're going to be selling, their properties, their developments will be handing over at the peak of the market. And therefore,
in 4 years' time, you say?
4 years' time, when the market has returned. So they think now is a great time to start building when costs are lower, and then when they hand over their owners will have made more money.
Yeah. So to go back to where we started this conversation,
we have meandered.
That's the point. So go back to where we started this conversation is, so the developers who are selling off plan, particularly the listed developers, a little bit easier if you're independently owned, will find it very difficult to stop bringing stock to the market. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Abu Dhabi government hasn't. I mean, it's, if you want your shareholders to be screaming in your ear, but to be honest, shareholders are reasonably reasonable, but it would be difficult for their business models to suddenly say, okay, we're just not going to earn any money for the next 4 years.
So in lay terms, one developer is unhappy with the way another developers are treating the market, in as much as they're flooding the market with new builds and new launches, which is obviously driving down the prices.
Yeah, I mean, flooding the market is, obviously depending where you're sitting, but obviously there's what there is some kind of consensus now, with a lot of people in Dubai is, you build it and there will come model, is not for the current cycle, and that we need to limit the number of launches. And there's some developers who are saying, I'm limiting my launches. Him over there, he's still launching, he's still selling. And so what's happened is I've taken, let's say, 1,000 units a year out of the market, and he's picking it up. The OPEC just recently agreed to remove 500,000 barrels out of the market. It would be pretty annoying if Saudi said, okay, we're removing all our barrels, and then someone else in the OPEC said, great, we're going to pump all that extra into the market, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to, prop up the oil price.
Yeah.
So there's a similar kind of feeling here among developers in terms of there being honor among thieves, but thinking, okay, let's limit the number of launches. But as I said, it's very difficult for particularly the listed developers.
So what can they do? You're saying that one is hamstrung by their devotion to their shareholders and the other is saying, well, we don't have shareholders, so we're more agile in the market. What can this developer or developers do? Can they do anything?
Well, I mean, the problem is costs for some developers are lower than others, and reputation for some developers is better than others. So developers with great reputation in terms of delivering quality product on time can continue to sell off plan and continue to launch. And developers who don't have that same reputation, when they launch, they struggle. They don't sell the same amount. But also the guys who have a lower cost base, let's say they acquired their land, for lower cost, or they've got a reputation of paying their contractors on time, so they can really get great prices on in terms of build cost. And on top of that, they can sell out their product, so they get better financing as well. Those guys can go in and offer much lower price points and much more attractive payment plans, and again, still sell while the other guys, struggle.
So it's the guys who potentially land banked when land prices were very, very cheap a long, long time ago.
Yeah, possibly gifted land as well.
Semi-government.
The landowner is either the owner of the company or a large shareholder. But fundamentally, what this is it's capitalism at work. Basically, some developers are, want to say, I'd love to say altruistic and saying, listen, we need to balance the market by bringing less to market. But it's probably a little bit of we can't sell at the same price these other guys can sell, and we can't sell at the same volume.
Okay, so you've got the one developer who's making the claims against the other.
Well, I mean, you know, don't want to talk about specifics.
Conversation with the other. Do you think if they could be building now and for the same kind of prices, they would be? I mean, you know, where's the sense in that? You know, when you look at someone like OPEC, they have a market understanding, a gentleman's agreement that they manage their oil prices the same. Would that be a good idea for Dubai? Would that be fair on the consumer in Dubai?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how legal it would be, to be honest, in the UAE for people in the market to coordinate their launches and coordinate their prices.
It's good for the consumer that prices are low.
Yeah,
because there's competition.
It's the market. Yeah, it's pure capitalism.
It is a market.
You got more supply than demand, so prices go down. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
I think what a lot of developers would like would be to have a gentleman's agreement, honor among thieves, to limit the supply and therefore bring everyone's prices up. But if you're the developer who is, able to still sell off plan, you'd be thinking to yourself, okay, well, why would I stop? I need to because of my shareholders' demand, return, income, and I can actually see this as an opportunity to get market share, which is what if we were talking about companies in any other market, you'd say that's how it would work. Yeah, exactly. So they would see this and if you saw it as any other market, you'd say, listen, we're in competition. I can get bigger market share by continuing to do what I'm doing now. Why wouldn't I do that? And the other person is saying, well, hold on, let's hold back because what we're creating here, what we're building, whether it's cars or villas or it's all the same, is being devalued because we're building so many of them. So it's a very interesting economic problem.
It is an age-old problem amongst anybody inside a market.
Yeah, I mean, it's capitalism,
and so it isn't going to stop. It cannot stop.
Well, I mean, so capitalism should affect the oil markets, and I think the OPEC example is quite good because all the oil producing countries, or not all, because the guys like the US and the UK and then the more like the Western countries aren't involved, but those particularly in the Gulf and so other areas have got together and said, if we all pump as much as we can, the oil price will go down to $10 a barrel. So let's not do that. Let's regulate how much we pump, and make sure that the price is high for everyone. And that is in a lot of countries, you're not allowed to fix the market in that way. And I think that's also the case in the UAE.
Yeah, I mean, it's not in the consumer's interest for them to fix the prices, especially in real estate. Ultimately, majority of people spend between 50 and 65% of their monthly income. 30 and 56, I think it was, terrible numbers, of their monthly income on their rent or their mortgage, and it's very much in their interest to be able to reduce that amount. And it's good for you, me, Joe Bloggs on the street who would like to have a bit more disposable income. So actually a weak property market is very good for people who are not directly invested in it.
Well, I mean, a weak property market is a little bit different. When you talk about low rental and sales prices, yeah, I mean, that's definitely good. A weak property market is obviously dreadful for two fat brokers, but a weak property market is one that's heading down. What we'd love is a flat real estate market at low prices.
Because real estate markets are driven by sentiment. If someone thinks, okay, it's going down, then they're going to wait. If someone thinks, right, it's going up, then I'm going to buy. But if it's doing nothing, nobody has any foresight to do anything. I mean, I've worked in 2 flat markets in the UK and in here, and it's the worst time to be a flat broker. It is the worst time.
Yeah, and I can see your point. When a market is showing directionality, at least people can make a bet.
Uncertainty. That is the. I mean, you can see it in the UK in Brexit. It's uncertainty, and the UK is really struggling. If there is any uncertainty in any market, people just back off.
I mean, everyone likes a rising market, but then, as you say, it's good for consumers if rents and sale prices are low.
Yeah.
So, perhaps
That's why you very
a
seldom
slowly
see a
rising
flat
market is best.
You very, very seldom see a flat market in any situation because people, they have their sentiment. They either go, okay, well, it's coming down, I'm going to cherry pick some great assets. Or they're like, right, okay, we're at the bottom, I'm going to plow a huge tranche of my money as an investor into the market, or I'm going to buy my future house right now. So the plateau in the market is scarce, a plateaued market. And if it does, it doesn't last long.
And then the real estate market's not one set of houses. There's different areas that are going up and down. True. Other areas that are going up and down. In Abu Dhabi, we see a lot of supply coming onto certain areas, and that affects regional prices. In that specific area much more than it affects elsewhere.
We've digressed again.
Okay.
So how do we draw a line under this conversation? What have we learned?
Yeah. Well, I think so.
Same as always. There's going to be no change regardless of the conversation that's going on.
No, I mean, I think a weak market always means that the strong players come out on top. I mean, that in a great market, everyone benefits, and a high tide floats all boats. But in a poor market, the guys who can build better, faster, lower cost, better payment plans, better financing, those guys will acquire market share, whichever way you look at it.
The conversation that is being had is between the two biggest players in the market.
Well, maybe that's not the conversation we're talking about. We don't want to be specific.
The conversation that if we weren't being specific, we would be having is amongst two of the potentially largest developers in Dubai, in the UAE.
Well, I don't know who you're talking about, but let's say, for example, that was true. What's your point?
My point is that... Oh, no, I couldn't make that point. I don't think there is a point to it, only to refute the point that you made, in as much as that in this market, it's the big boys that come out on top. It is the people who have a lower bottom line that come out on top. I think there is a degree of foresight or market protectionism from that's the conversation that's being had. Let's try and keep the prices at a certain level by not flooding them up, by not increasing the level of construction in the market. And one is saying, okay, well, I think it's a good idea, and the other one's saying it's a bad idea. And that's the conversation that's being potentially had somewhere out there at one given time, once.
Seems to be.
In a galaxy far away.
Yeah, and I think, we're in the same way what we're seeing in Abu Dhabi is off-plan launches pretty much at the moment only come from one developer, and that's Aldar. Now, they are much bigger than all the other developers, but also they have a great reputation in the market. They're able to build, good quality stuff, cost effectively. Their ability to deliver on time
other developers
is,
are available.
is better than the rest of the market. So what you're going to see is in Abu Dhabi, Aldar continue to launch off plan and acquire that market share. And I think it's probably the same in
I think you're right.
in Dubai.
I don't think we will see any more. I mean, certainly the major players here, the semi-government owned Emaar, have been the guys who have been launching most products, and they have a great name in the market. I definitely see that they've slowed off. They've definitely backed off on their launches. It's not to say that they've stopped, but they've definitely slowed. So, perhaps we're having a conversation a little bit too late. Maybe they're doing something about it.
Maybe they are. We shall see. Watch this space. Anyway, thank you very much. We've been Two Fat Brokers. We'll see you on the next podcast.
Thanks for coming.
Bye.